Good evening, viewers, and welcome to this TFN exclusive. I am Sergio Brito. Joining me in the studio today is political scientist and social commentator Essa Njie. Essa, welcome to the Fatu Network.
Thank you very much, Sergio, for having me.
A range of issues I would like us to discuss, but first, you know, as a political scientist and someone who understands politics, what is your observation of the current political climate in this country?
Well, interesting. We are at a very critical juncture in our democratic dispensation. At a critical juncture in the sense that, you know, when we restored democracy in 2016, our task was to work towards consolidation. Of course, we are in that process of consolidation, but it's something that takes time, that takes a decade or 20 years or more, because for democracy to be consolidated, like I always say, it has to, resist, you know, reverting to autocracy. It has to survive long. We are at a critical juncture in our political, you know, democratic dispensation in the sense that we must work towards consolidating our democratic gains. But I sometimes, get discouraged a bit in terms of, you know, some of the signs that we have. Obviously, these are signs that scholars will say, you know, tend to return a country to autocracy because of the norm of big man rule. And of course, this is due to the absence of democratic accountability, especially when it comes to the role of opposition and civil society, holding the government to account, pressurizing the government. And I think we're at a situation where we have a government that does not feel pressured, that understands the psyche of the people that they're dealing with, knowing fully well that, well, scandals can happen. At the end of the day, people talk about them 1 or 2 days or 3 days, and that's it. And then everybody goes back, goes to sleep in peace. So I think we are at that juncture in our politics, but it's also quite interesting. We will see, what happens in 2023 when it comes to the local government elections, knowing fully well that what happened in the 2021 presidential election was quite different from what prevailed in the parliamentary election of 2022, because we saw the president having outright majority of 53% in the presidential election. But in the parliamentary election, it was a different case. We have a more balanced parliament in our history, in our political history, and then that might also dictate what happens in 2023. We'll see what happens later.
Right. So President Barrow has just returned from the recently concluded UNGA, and he's set to fly out again tomorrow to Mali for another meeting. Did you listen to the president's speech, and what do you make of it? Because I feel like so many things were said, and the Gambia took so many strong positions, but it seems like everyone was fixated on, you know, Dusano, the bread, and stuff like that. What do you make of the president's speech?
I did not only listen to it or watch it, but I also read it. Even the text, I read the text because I wanted to be sure of exactly what was written and what was said. I think the president, or the Gambia took very strong position, because the president, of course, spoke on behalf of the Gambian state or the Gambia government. The Gambia took very strong positions on a lot of international issues, especially, and of course that shows us the direction of foreign policy has been taken of recent, especially under Barrow, knowing fully well that, you know, since the resumption of ties with China, People's Republic of China, we've, focused on infrastructural diplomacy as opposed to checkbook diplomacy that Taiwan has been providing. And of course, President Barrow has made it very clear since he came to office, his government is committed to the One China policy, which was very clear in his statement. But also there was another important issue that he made mention of, which has to do, of course, Gambia's foreign policy again. But this is within the continent, that has to do with the Al-Sharawi Republic, Western Sahara, saying that they believe, the Gambia government or the Gambia believes that Morocco has a sovereign right over Western Sahara. I think I found that so puzzling, and I am interested to know what is the specific foreign policy benefit that the Gambia will gain from taking a very strong, but also controversial position on that, because we know very well
this is part of the AU, by the way.
Exactly. The Western Sahara is recognized by the AU. Not only that, but they also have a seat in the Pan-African Parliament. So 45 countries at the UN, 45 out of the 193 countries all recognize Western Sahara. So it's not only about the Gambia taking a position to say we do not recognize Western Sahara. That's not the only thing here, but also geographically, you are from a continent or a geographical area in the world that recognize this territory, even though, you know, it's also at a loggerhead with another country, but having even sit at the Pan-African Parliament. So foreign policy, we know, must be driven by national interest. And I am interested to see
what is it there for
what
the
is
Gambia?
there for the Gambia to benefit from taking such a very, you know, controversial and strong position on China. I'm sorry, on, you know, Western Sahara and Morocco. Knowing fully well that there's a history behind this, you know, Morocco claiming ownership, but at some point also, you know, Mauritania claiming, but we know that they were able to push out the Mauritanians way back in 1979 and then coming to Morocco now. But also the president talked about the issue of climate change. Yeah. And of course, you know, I think there have been positive, you know, comments or feedbacks from even around the world that the Gambia, you know, is one of the countries that is moving towards meeting the target in, you know, ensuring that the Paris climate deal you know, is adhered to. But we know very well that the Gambia is from a country, or the part of the world, sorry, that does not necessarily contribute, you know, to the climate change, for instance, greenhouse gas effect. But then we receive the burden of it, just like most countries in the less industrialized part of the world, you know, receive the brunt of it. But then the Gambia also is a victim of that. And I think also he made mention of, you know, calling on the international community to ensure that they invest a lot in peace and stability, especially in the African continent, and of course mentioning peacekeeping missions that African countries are participating in, which I think is very crucial as far as, you know, meeting the UN target of peace, you know, building in countries are concerned. But I think also another key important issue that he made mention of has to do with the economic implications of COVID-19 and of course, you know, the Ukrainian war, otherwise I call it the Putin war. Yeah. But I think also African governments must stop taking excuse of COVID-19.
Yeah, because at this point, a lot of people are saying that they're just using these as an excuse. Yes.
Because if you tell us that COVID-19 and the Ukrainian war, you know, has caused a lot of economic, you know, consequences, obviously we know that. But if that is the case, it shows that we are in a dire economic situation, right? If that is the case, what we expect African governments to do is to try to cut their spendings by limiting their travels and also limiting their delegations. But the Gambia, I think, went right up to, I'm not quite sure.
Let's talk about the delegation. Let's talk about the delegation and the quality of people who also travel with the president. We've seen, you know, people like Dusano. This has angered a lot of Gambians because they are saying that, first of all, Gambia does not need this many people at the UNGA summit.
Yeah, just yesterday I was watching a video where these people, even though I disagree with the derogatory term that they use, third world countries, but you know, they're trying to show how a lot of African countries or delegates that will travel to this UNGA will actually abandon the summit itself and go and be shopping in the streets of New York and also sleeping in very expensive hotels.
I think I watched something
exactly, when a lot of their people, you know, don't even have access to clean drinking water, don't have access to proper health care, you know, proper schools and all that. These are challenges that we face, and the Gambia is not an exception to that. For me, I think, you know, people like Dusano, for instance, traveling to New York was just political in the sense that I am just making this assumption, probably because the president must have been aware or must have received information earlier that there are a score of Gambians who will be protesting. So Dusano went there specifically for that, because if you look at his engagements, we have never seen him even in a picture with the president around the UN building. Yes. What we saw was that he was out there to hold a small gathering with those Gambian community, trying to explain to them that these protesters who came out are even less than 15 in number. And also he was out there when the president had a meeting with this community of Gambians there. He was also there talking about this bread, and then he also made a video saying, you know, everywhere is expensive in the world. This bread is costing $6. So you could realize that he went there for a purpose, and the purpose was probably to dispel all what the diaspora Gambians who showed dissatisfaction against the president will say. But I think that's very unfortunate that we have to be very mindful of the caliber of people that we take there. Because for me, I mean, Dusano claiming that bread costs $6 in the US, I mean, it's not funny. I don't find it funny. It's just like if a White House advisor or number 10 Downing Street advisor comes and say something that is unfounded. I mean, that brings a lot of shame, a big shame to the country. And I think it's not funny for Gambians to. It's not funny. Gambians must.
We take this very lightly.
We take this to be funny, and then we joke about it. But there are a lot of important issues that we should focus on, and the president should just do favor for this country by limiting the number of people, especially those that have nothing to do there. And in fact, you'll be surprised that the advance team went, I think, 2 weeks ahead of the president's travel. What are they doing there in 2 weeks before the president travel? And how much is the state investing in paying all those people,
the accommodations and everything.
And they sleep in very expensive hotels. So I think this is really bad for, the economic situation of the country.
And when the president was in the US, some Gambians came out, to protest against, some of the things that are happening in this country. Gambians came out, I would say, but it seems like the president decided to put a tag on them by calling them UDP Gambians. I mean, what do you make of that statement?
Well, I think it's just unfortunate. These are Gambians that were just merely exercising their constitutional right, and even in the country that they are living, they have that right. In fact, you and I know that that right is more respected in those societies where people will come out and show their dissatisfaction against the government. So I think it was rather unfortunate. The president should have just said that, well, there were a group of Gambians who came out and showed their dissatisfaction, and I take this in good faith. I accept it. It's a criticism. A positive one. They are just showing their dissatisfaction about how the country is being run, and I think that is fine. But for me also, I mean, it's not bad for these people to protest, but I just find it not very useful. Not very useful in the sense that I'm not saying it's bad. They did what they have to do, but these people are protesting on behalf of people that seem not to care. We are the ones that are feeling the pinch of everything in this country. If Gambians are not showing commitment, if Gambians are not asking relevant questions, showing to the president that, look, we're concerned about how this country is run, why should those in the diaspora care? We know that diaspora constitute, at some point, some of these activists constitute, Gambian CSOs in the diaspora at some point. But I think it's the Gambians themselves in the country that are feeling the pinch of this, that should really come out and talk to the president. With all the scandals happening in this country, like I said, Sergio, just last week on the papers, that no opposition is coming out, no civil society is coming out to talk about some of these things. Every day is a scandal in this country. Just National Assembly, debate currently going on. They are telling us that they have discovered 29-point-something million dollars that were unaccounted for, according to the National Audit Report. Nobody shows concern. The security.
There's no outrage whatsoever.
There's no outrage.
Expect that people would be out there
asking questions, especially from the opposition and civil society. And like I said, it's sad to say, but this is the reality, that we have election-oriented opposition parties that will just come and contest election. When elections are over, they go back to their political bureaus, and it's only a few of their militants that will be out there making statements on issues that are, it's like they divide our attention to more pressing issues, because some of these militants don't also understand the realities. They only come and talk about, for instance, you're talking about the Dusano thing. Instead of looking at what the president has said at the summit that will have bearings on the Gambia, significant bearing on the Gambia, we tend to focus on, oh, Dusano said this, oh, Dusano said this. And then we also have civil society that are just project-oriented, sad to say, that will just focus on winning projects, and when it's time for election, they go and observe elections, they monitor, they prepare their report, preliminary statement, and issued. Election is free and fair. They don't even understand their role in a democratic society. So it's really unfortunate. And if you look at the history of democratization process in Africa, after the Cold War, this was what Samuel Huntington called the third wave democratization. Civil society were really instrumental. We saw the Zambian Congress of Trade Union, how it was instrumental, in fact, metamorphosed into a political party called Movement for Multi-Party Democracy. This was the party that removed the long-standing dictator Kenneth David Kaunda in Zambia. So, and civil society in Mali, in Niger, they were effective on the continent. And I think at this stage, when Africans are now not talking about the building and restoration of democracy, but moving towards consolidation, if civil society is not vibrant, I think that is really bad for our democratic dispensation.
I read your dormant political parties after election piece, and I think your piece did not sit quite well with some of these political parties. I think one of the regional spokespersons of the UDP responded by saying that it was very misleading and unfair of you to say that, you know, political parties in this country are in fact dormant after the elections.
No, he did not say that, because I saw that later in the evening. He did not say that, for me, it's unfair for me to say opposition parties are dormant. He said it's unfair for me to include UDP.
UDP, okay.
For him, all the opposition parties are
dormant, but not the UDP.
I mean, we have not seen any difference. We have not seen any difference between the UDP and all these opposition parties. What have they done specifically? And the man could not point out. I think, I don't want to respond, but in his understanding, because he was talking more about history. That since 1996 UDP was here. Nobody will dispute that the UDP was one of the most formidable, you know, vibrant opposition party in the country during Jammeh's time. But we're talking about at present, since after the election, what has the party done? What has other opposition parties done in terms of holding this government to account? Everyday scandals. And if they talk about parliament again, I mean, laws not being there and all that, I mean, we have a more balanced parliament in the political history of this country, like I said. Majority, if you look at it technically, majority of the people in parliament, majority of parliamentarians are from the opposition if you combine. But what are they doing to really actually push the idea of ensuring that the government is held to account, but also to make sure that the needed reforms are done in this country? We saw in 2017, when the fifth legislature, I think it's the fifth legislature or fourth legislature, when they came in 2017, what they did was, you know, first to change the age limit, you know, with the president or the vice president, you know, and then also what they did was to change the law, which says that if you remove from your party as a parliamentarian, you automatically lose your seat, because that suits them. We also saw, you know, them trying to get $54 million in loan, and then what we saw recently was when they allocated themselves $100,000 each. For clothing allowance, when a lot of people they represent don't even have access to clean drinking water. People are paying you from taxpayers' money. What exactly are you? Do people have to provide for the money that you buy your clothes to wear when you go into parliament? You get that from your salary. So it's unfortunate that we have a country where the opposition parliamentarians, it's unfortunate, Sergio, but I have to say this, that this might be the worst parliament that Gambia ever have, because we have parliamentarians that don't really understand their function, their role, or they don't care about the welfare and well-being of the people that they represent. What we are seeing in parliament is mostly jokes. People who contribute don't even critically look at the statement revealed by the president. Look at when just to say this, when during his
State of the Nation address, which I will come to later.
Okay, that's fine. But he made mention of something which I think every Gambian should go and fact check. The man said since the beginning of 2021-2022 tourist season, Gambia receives 53 flights a week, average of 8 flights a day. Where? And nobody seemed to care. Parliamentarians should have asked this man. The Minister of Tourism should have been there. When he was there, he should have been asked. The President said 53 flights come per week. Where are all those stories when hotels and restaurants and bars are closed?
Empty.
Where is the money going to? We want to see that money coming. But nobody is asking those relevant questions. Instead, what we are seeing is that people praising the president for delivering what I call a mere, you know, activity.
You know, it brings me to my next question, because most critics have described this year's SONA address as, you know, unconstitutional. Some, in fact, said that it was very dishonest and underwhelming. What do you make of this year's SONA address?
Well, I think those that are arguing about the unconstitutionality, I think probably talk about the period at which the SONA was held. It should be held, I think, the beginning of the year. But that's legal. I don't want to go into that. I'm not a legal person. That is not my area. But looking at the SONA, when it was delivered, my assessment was, you know, that this was, the president just read a mere activity report of an underperforming government. You see, Sergio, it's very easy for someone to sit somewhere. Different ministries will come and put something together and give it to the president and say, come and read. Anybody can do that. Even a primary school kid can do that, can just come and read for us what is there. But you see, the SONA is about addressing the current realities, even the nomenclature itself. State of the Nation address. You talk to the people, you speak to the current realities on the ground. And there are 3 things that matter to Gambians a lot that the president did not talk about, or even if he had talked about them, it was just like, he just pointed at them. One is the issue of corruption. This is the cancer to our development today. The president merely said, well, there is an anti-corruption bill in Parliament. Everybody knows that. It has been there for years now.
Yeah, it has been there for a long time.
It has been there for years. He should have told us in concrete terms what his government plans to do with that bill. What is the state of preparedness on the part of his government to ensure that this bill is passed? Parliamentarians don't just leave it lying in Parliament, but it makes sure that it is passed, it's become a law. But also, what has his government's concrete plans to deal with corruption? He should have even mentioned a lot of cases in this country, the scandals, the state losing the $25 million case involving the GNPC, that was a big loss to the state. What happened exactly, what went wrong, that they could not even provide tangible evidence in court to be able to get these people. But they did not do all that. So the president did not speak to the issue of corruption that Gambians are crying about. But also he did not speak to the issue of crime rate, crimes in the country. Petty crimes and banditry is rampant in this country now. The president, in fact, remember, I think it was few days after, you know, that was hotel incident and some killings that happened in the country, that the president went to deliver this state. What was wrong with the president even taking a minute to observe, a minute of silence, and also to pay condolence to the victims and their families, to extend his, his grief to these people, to say, we're really concerned. Even off the script, put aside the script and talk to the Gambian people about the security situation of this country. What is the fate of the security of this country? So will it continue to be in the hands of economic forces, or will we hand over back to our brothers and sisters in uniform? That was not clear. But also the other pressing issue is the economic situation that we are living in. High cost of living in the country. The president merely said, COVID-19 as usual, Ukrainian war or the Putin war, and that was it. But then, yes, we understand that these are realities that happen. But every serious government must have a way out. You must have plans.
What is being done?
Exactly. What is being done, and what are your concrete plans as a government to make sure that you address these things? But you can't just come and tell us the problem without providing solution, because government is there to provide solution to societal problems. But these things we are not saying. That is why, for me, it was just merely an activity report talking about foreign policy. Well, we could have registered significant improvements. Maybe, you know, if he focused on China, infrastructural diplomacy, the roads and bridges, those are things that we've seen and they are undeniable. But then it goes back to the question of, we saw a few months ago, the vice president stood and said the Gambia does not have a foreign policy, but even if it has, it is dormant. And the president coming other way around to say that we have registered significant improvements in our foreign policy.
They don't seem to be on the same page.
It's really problematic. I don't know what went wrong. Yeah. So I think the SONA should have been really, you know, critically looked at by the parliamentarians, but also by the generality of Gambians, to look at what the president, what was missing and what was said that was right.
In your opinion, do you think that the president has the political will to genuinely remedy these issues that you just mentioned?
Well, the issue of corruption, I'm not saying any genuine, willingness on the part of the president, because I think the scandals happening in this country is every day. And the last time I remember when the president was interviewed, because it's difficult for even journalists to interview this man and ask him some of these relevant questions, because the press conference is no more existing. You know, so when he was being asked about this, I think the only thing is that because he made reference to the Fisheries Permanent Secretary case, where he said that they cannot take people to court when they don't have evidence against them. I'm like, what evidence more do you need when somebody was caught on record, okay, admitting to this? And then, yeah, so you just asking us to, people must bring evidence. What is the job of the state? The state must take responsibility to investigate some of these things. We're talking about the $11 million here at the Ministry of Justice. This was sometime like 2 years ago, more than a year. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, we saw on the papers that the police PRO is telling us that the last time she checked, the investigations are yet to be completed. I mean,
good, yes.
Exactly. So we have a country where the president, because for me, I think the president himself probably has an interest in corruption, and that is why he doesn't care. I mean, what happens next? Because at the end of the day, the masses continue to suffer. But those cabals that continue to loot the state resources will continue to enjoy. And the president is part of that.
Right. And when the president returned from the UNGA General Summit, he mentioned something that I think is very important after speaking about the protest. What he said was that he understands that Gambians are also planning another protest in November, and he's saying that he's basically opening his doors, for dialogue. Do you think that this was like a genuine call?
Well, you see, the president must understand one thing, that in a democracy, as far as we choose democracy over dictatorship, citizens have the right to protest. And citizens have a right to show their dissatisfaction about how government is working, operating. If the president really opens his doors, for engagement, for dialogue or whatever, this is not the way. Don't talk to the protesters. Do the act. People want to see these things being addressed. That is the way out. If you address some of these things, probably nobody will think of coming out. But the reason why people want to come out is because you have given a deaf ear and a blind eye to all these things that are happening in the country. And now you're telling us that it's not about you and those people that want to protest. It's about, this is a contract between you as the president and the Gambian people. You have a contract with them. And the contract is to serve their welfare and well-being, to meet their needs and aspirations. But if you are not doing that, it simply means you have failed in your responsibility, you have failed in doing your job, and then people want to come out and then you are saying that my doors are open. It's not about opening doors for those people that want to protest. It's about dealing with the welfare and well-being of the people.
And finally, before I let you go, the grade 9 results will be out today. I think this is something that will be interesting to you as an educationist. What are your expectations, especially after seeing how bad the WAS results were just a couple of months ago?
I think we discussed the grade 12 results here, and my take has always been the same, Sergio, as far as our education system is concerned. I've said this the last time it was on the media and I received some backlash, but it's the sad reality that our education system is not fit for purpose. We must start reforming it. I'm not expecting anything different from the grade 12 results that a lot of people will call poor, depending on how they look at it. But for me, it's not about the grade 12 results that is poor. It is our education system that is poor and not fit for purpose. And I'm not expecting anything different. We will come back here and still talk about, poor grade 9 results, without going back to the drawing board to really think of restructuring and reforming our education system to suit our realities.
Thank you very much for coming, Essa.
You're welcome.
Well, this now brings us to the end of this exclusive interview on TFN today. Do join us tomorrow if you can. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.